It's been said that history, as we're taught it in school, is in fact the history of powerful men in fancy rooms cutting deals. If you accept this model, Poland is your poster child. Poland's the one seated awkwardly at the corner of the table, in the chair with one leg that's slightly shorter than the others, just trying to break even. Growing up, I knew that I was Polish, but what that meant, however, emanated from a variety of subtleties that made up the fabric of my childhood, and can only be dissected in retrospect. In my mind, Poland was a big lump of white and red between the Nazis and the commies. As I grew older, I gained some historical perspective. I realized that, in fact, Poland was what happened when Germany and Russia took 10 paces back in a duel. This would happen every 50 years or so, just enough time to let the debris decay into the soil. The soil was Poland. These moments were filled with political movements of nostalgia and solidarity, in which moving back was forward, where it was progressive simply to exist. My mom made a traditional Polish costume for my brother when he was in 5th grade. It was for Multicultural Day. That's the day when everyone remembers where they came from by making a felt imitation of traditional clothing.
Hi, Adam.
It's like Halloween with rules. I'm not sure where that kid's supposed to be from. Miami? It's like It's a Small World after all, only with real children. Not that I have anything against multiculturalism, I just find it strange to see a bunch of kids dressed up like dolls in a Disney-esque utopian pageant, singing songs to end all war and human suffering. Songs written by some jingle musician that's raking in the royalties from every public school system in the country. I think Coke bought this one.
Trees Suddenly something seems to have happened. Are those Poles seeing a ghost? Why does this car suddenly stop? Everybody seems to be staring in one direction. People seem to be frightened, even terrified, some flabbergasted. Can it be true? It must be true, no doubt. The man with the little mustache? Adolf Hitler. Is he by any chance interested in Mr. Maslovsky's delicatessen? That's impossible. He's a vegetarian. And yet he doesn't always stick to his diet. Sometimes he swallows whole countries. Does he want to eat up Poland, too?
Ćwiczenia kawalerii.
I remember sabers and miniature cannons, badges, pastels of horses hung in old dusty frames, wood carvings of the monastery at Monte Cassino. Visiting my Jaja was like visiting a war room. I could smell the gunpowder and horse dung. It felt like war felt in history books. It made me proud, but about what I wasn't exactly sure. As a kid, this was how I knew him as a soldier, until I saw this footage. I never spotted him in the film, but I see his face on every body.
Intrygi i rozgrywki personalne zrobiły swoje. Typowe polityczne piekiełko.
The Polish army in exile had made a home in Palestine, where he had met his wife, who would give birth to their first child in Tel Aviv. My Jaja was a newlywed and a new father when he was sent to Italy. The Battle of Monte Cassino was the fall of Nazi Germany's Italian front. After being pounded by virtually every other Allied army, it was the Poles' shining moment. Now they got their chance for retribution, even if it was hundreds of miles from home.
The underground is still alive.
The victory led to the capture of Rome and the downfall of the Nazi Empire. However, after the Allied victory, Poland wasn't at a loss for an oppressor. As post-war agreements drew the Iron Curtain, Poland was left in the dark, once again under Russian control. As a child, he had witnessed the first Bolshevik incursions. Now he watched as a matured Soviet empire took control of his homeland, with a sense of entitlement for having freed the Poles from fascism.
The Russian aim is to dominate the world. They think that communism must succeed eventually if the Soviet Union is left reasonably intact.
Maybe they think that even capitalists aren't that insane to want to kill after they themselves have been killed.
These are Marxist fanatics, not normal people. They do not reason the way you reason, General Black. They are not motivated by human emotions such as rage and pity. They are calculating machines. They will look at the balance sheet and they will see they cannot win.
Then you suggest doing what?
After the war, while staying in London, my mother was born. Now with 2 children, they packed their bags. He and his family would spend the Cold War in Detroit, Michigan, in what was back then a thriving Polish community. This is where my mom grew up. Back home in Poland, the family was also living a new version of Polish culture. By the time we arrived in Berlin, the wall had become quite a tourist site. For a 7-year-old like myself, it didn't seem far from visiting ancient ruins, like the Parthenon or Stonehenge, like a construction that lost its context and became a surreal mystery, leaving it only as a novelty for family photo ops, postcards, and mementos. To me, it was as if the wall had decayed through the years, by weather and time. I could stick my head through the holes in the wall, looking across no man's land to the east. On the way home, we took a wrong turn and ended up way east, just miles from the border. It was the closest I've ever gotten to Poland.
Let me hit that monster in the jaw.
Okay, go get them.
I remember this German guy with his dog, sending him back and forth through this hole in the wall. East, west, east. It looked so easy. Three days after we left Berlin, that slab of concrete started coming down. About 7 years later, when I was 14, in my nihilistic, pseudo-bohemian phase, I came home one day to inform my mom of this incredible thing called communism. I had just read Marx for the first time. She looked frightened. We had a long talk.
Martial law is an admission that the regime has lost the people's consent. Relying solely on the power to prohibit, the regime has lost all ability to persuade.
I slowly began to understand what had been going on beyond no man's land. What was beyond those high-rise buildings? Where those holes in the wall came from? How some ruins are man-made.
Tak. Wydaje mi się, że w poniedziałek postawię cały kraj na nogi. Zrobię strajk. Pan tak przekaże to. Ja mam dość żartów i podjazdów. Panie wojewu, pan dobrze wie. Więc pan przekaże rządowi, że w poniedziałek prawdopodobnie dam rozkaz do strajku generalnego. Dziękuję. Trochę demokracji, trochę wolności osobistej. Przez każdych ludzi. O, nie dam rady. No, tak bardzo trudno. I kulturalnie tego nie mogę.
Another one of our elementary participants represents the free country of Poland. This costume comes.
I thought only of his life before the United States. Before he had left the life of an officer to become a baker. I thought of the dreams he may have had and the passions of meeting his wife mid-war in Palestine in a refugee camp. Their peak years were spent as nomads, refugees, fighting for space. I thought about how he had been in a Jeep accident and broken almost every bone in his body. How the snow-white hair I had always attributed to his age and wisdom had actually come from the trauma of an accident he had when he was still a young man. I had a flash of them, in their prime, in a room regarding no space or time, just relics of their life.
Po co właściwie ta broń wisi na ścianie? Komu to teraz potrzebne?
Widzisz, przeszliśmy wielką drogę, ale nie doszliśmy jeszcze do wolnej Polski. A żeby dojść, i to może być jeszcze potrzebne.
And whatever in the army, I had a good life. Shooting, roaming, then taking under care. But you know me, I see that not very often, but often enough, you repay with memories. So brave and so rushing as life itself. It happens that I am to be the oldest of our family.
It should be.
100 years. and wave another 100 years faster and better. And with better memories later than before.
Here, here.
Tyle gwiazd, w dole tyle miast.
It wasn't until I was 20 that I saw actual film of these people. For those 19 years they had existed as statuesque black and white portraits of faces unknowing of the war that would be fought, of faces glad to be alive, of gaps in family portraits. It's like they're trying to show me their lives, like children at show and tell, waving their favorite toys around for the audience to see, showing me how their babies can walk, how fast they can run, what flowers smell like, sometimes welcoming me, sometimes just acknowledging me as a presence at a family function. I know in my rational mind that they're waving at a machine, but I don't think it makes a difference. Their waves are unconditional. They speak to my desire to connect with ghosts and former visions of my loved ones. Their urge to document becomes their willingness to share with me, inviting me into moments I could never be a part of. Everyone in this documentary had the experience of facing a camera, of giving the gift of a stare or a glance unconditionally to an infinite audience. Yet not all of them had the privilege to watch ghosts parade through their living rooms so casually, to see the posture of survivors at the touch of a button.